Hey folks, it's Steve Wilmes and Matt Kieta, and we're here with another episode of the Risk Control Show. I know it's been a while, but Matt and I have been out and about. We've been all over California and Arizona and doing a lot of different things. And so we're going to bring you the news from around a portion of the globe.
With all the driving we did, it's a big enough portion for me, Steve.
Yeah, no joke, man. My right leg's like, you're gonna have neuropathy very soon. Anyway, today we're talking about tourniquets. As you may or may not know, Matt is a certified first aid CPR AED instructor from the American Red Cross, and we've been doing a lot of that training. I'll have to bring up some pictures here and show everybody as we go through. But, we've been doing a lot of training. There's a lot of controversial discussions that happen in regard to certain treatments. A lot of people think that they know better than the doctors and the surgeons and all of this kind of stuff. And you get information from the American Red Cross. Remember, they're trying to be conservative to keep you out of trouble. This is all things that if you do, you're protected under Good Samaritan law with the training that you have, and if you stay within your training. So when you get into these advanced techniques, you have to understand where you are in regard to a professional versus a lay person in a Good Samaritan role. And that even really comes down to if you're working in a non-emergency services role inside your agency, right? Like let's say you're working for a city and you are EMS. Well, you're a professional at that point, right? So if you're just in water treatment or you're a teacher, you're not a professional. You're still relying on your skills, right? Even though the training may be required and this and that. So you're not a professional medical individual that has other knowledge and skills and immunities, so to speak, right?
Right, exactly. There's a specific difference under the training between layperson and training for the professional medical personnel. So that which includes EMS. And most of the training that you'll see when you say that someone has been trained in CPR, most of the time they are referring to the basic level skills level training, which is for a layperson.
Right. So this tourniquet issue is one. I guess the question is, and here's the time for you to put in the comment if you're watching this. How long do you think you can leave a tourniquet on without any damage or loss of limb? And so that's the question, right? You've been shot in the arm. You have been deep wounded with a knife. You've been gashed by something in the field. And you need to stop that bleed. How long can the tourniquet be on safely? That's the question. People ask this question almost every session of our first aid CPR class. And, we answer it. And today we're going to answer it here so that you have some understanding. So put your answer there in the comments and let us know what you think. And we'll see. We'll give you an answer here in. Go ahead, Matt.
All right. So as you've addressed, Steve, there is a misconception in the general public that when you put on a tourniquet, it's going to mean that limb is going to be amputated. The thinking behind it is life over limb. So if you have a life-threatening bleed condition, and there's the possibility that the person who is injured might actually die, then you're going to make that choice to apply a tourniquet if it's in an area of the body where that's applicable and stop that bleed as soon as possible. But the concept behind that for many people is that when you do that, you are choosing the life of that person over the use of that limb in the future, that it's going to need to be amputated. And look, there is a point at which that is going to result in ischemia and the development of necrosis in the arm. So the necrosis is the essentially oxygen is being deprived from the cells and everything in the arm or the leg. When you tie it off with the tourniquet, it no longer receives that. It also is not able to export toxins that grow within the process of the cells and to be removed by other organs in your body, such as your liver. So as a result, these cells begin to die, and that's where necrosis develops. So
And
after a
this
period,
would be akin for those of you who have been through fall protection.
Mhm.
This would be akin to suspension trauma. And remember, in suspension trauma, they start to talk about 15 minutes worth of time, even though your harness is not fully circling the leg, right? It's typically open on the one side. But people do pass out and things like this from these areas because it's very high in the crotch and it's on the femoral artery. So understand, when you apply a tourniquet, you're cutting off the flow of blood below the tourniquet site, and that is going to impact the muscles, nerves, tendons, everything below that site that blood delivers oxygen to and keeps lubricated and working properly.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. The conditions have related consequences in those situations. So getting back to that was a long answer without actually providing you with the answer. Let me tell you the straight answer. In the field, it is considered that up to 2 hours, you are pretty much at very little to no risk of losing that limb. So whether it's a leg, whether it's an arm, if you apply a tourniquet within 2 hours, it should have no long lasting effects. Now, keep in mind, there's always going to be it's not biology isn't so simple. Sometimes you'll find a case where it could happen. However, in general, it is regarded as safe to apply a tourniquet for up to 2 hours.
I think
At that,
I feel like maybe we should have some other little warnings in here about the
yeah,
tourniquets before we get too far down this road. Let's just go here and say, as a disclaimer, we're not telling you to apply a tourniquet in all situations. These are for life-threatening emergencies where you cannot control the bleeding. Number two, you can only apply tourniquets to arms and legs, never around the neck. You'll kill somebody that way.
yep.
Around the body's not going to work. So arms and legs only. And when we say the word tourniquet, it's important to understand that there's a lot of types of tourniquets, from makeshift to professional tourniquets that can be applied. And so when we're talking about applying a tourniquet, we're talking about a professional tourniquet in the sense that it's usually a CAT Gen 7, which is a particular specification for a tourniquet. And you can find these on, I'll pull one up here, Matt. Let me see
Okay.
here.
Okay.
On Amazon, I'll pull one up. Well, let me pull something. Um, yeah,
Well,
combat.
while
Yep.
you're looking that up, Steve, just to follow up on what you were saying, yes, there is a process that you're going to approach with respect to specifically applying a tourniquet. For sure, if you do not have a life-threatening bleed, then you should not be applying a tourniquet in that case. And there are specific parts of the body that a tourniquet is a viable option. Elsewhere, it is not. So on the legs, on the arms, it is okay. But yes, anywhere on the torso, up in the head, there's no use of a tourniquet in any of those. So you would need to apply direct pressure. And I also want to stress that direct pressure is the first action that you should be taking with any life-threatening bleed.
Okay.
That you
Let me
should,
show this picture here.
sure.
This is I think you bought AEDs from the AED Superstore, didn't you?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
They,
I'm
they,
showing their
they-
page here, and it's the tourniquet, the professional tourniquet. It's a CAT Gen 7. CAT means combat application tourniquet. It's not the CAT heavy equipment that you see out in the field. So, but they have different generations, iterations of these. This is, I think, the most recent one. And
the windlash one.
well, yeah, the windlass. I'm just saying, I'm not sure if there's a Cat 8 at this point,
Right.
or not. But the point being is, these are the ones that are the official our U.S. Army tourniquets, and so these are used in combat. They're very effective. But as you see, the strap here is much wider. Now, as I said before I started down that road, was there are different types of tourniquets. So can you make your own tourniquet? Yes, a lot of people will pull off a belt and they'll try and get that nice and tight to stop the bleed. That has been effective in some circumstances.
Yep.
You'll when you go in to have your blood withdrawn for general lab work, a lot of times they'll take a small rubber tubing and place that around your arm to get the veins to pump up. Right, they'll have you squeeze your fist and try to get blood
Yep.
to travel down there. And as you see, you can still get blood to travel down there. That's how they get the veins to pop up. And in those circumstances, they're not applying it as tight as you would in the field. And so that little piece of tubing is much narrower than these professional Cat Gen 7s. And
Yep.
all of this makes a big difference. So when Matt is speaking about applying a tourniquet, he's talking about the professional Cat Gen 7s. I think the Gen 6 are pretty close to the same width. I'll do a little research while you're still talking here, Matt, and see if
Sure.
they've come out with a newer version of this. I know I just
Mhm.
bought like 12 of these. So let's see.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Look, I am referring to a cat to a standard issue medical tourniquet that you see it used in combat, you see it used by EMS. And I'm not referring to any household items such as a belt or rubber tubing or anything of that variety. It should be noted that a study that the Mayo Clinic reported on indicated that those kinds of items used for a tourniquet fail in some level 6 out of 7 times. So this is why it's really important to have this tourniquet. They're not expensive. I think the one I have was maybe $30, Steve.
Yeah, this
And,
one's from North American Rescues going for $31.59.
right,
Yeah,
right.
I
And
mean,
there's
you can
really
get them
no
on. We say this every time. Be careful where you buy your equipment. You
Mhm.
can get stuff on Amazon, and it can be a fake, and that can be a real tragedy if you're getting
Yes.
something that's manufactured not to the specifications. I mean, the beautiful. I'll show you this here. Let me bring this on screen real quick. The beautiful thing about these is right here you have ANSI and ISEA standards, and
Mhm.
as we know, um, especially in the world of safety, ANSI standards, they govern everything, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
they set the standard.
they
Yeah.
set the standard, it's a specification. And a lot of times you get on some of these other sites and they'll say, oh, yeah, it meets this, it meets that, blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't. And we see this with latex gloves, we see this with hard hats, we see this with boots. You buy cheap, off brand stuff, and maybe that windlass is not the right pure plastic that you need, or
Mhm.
there's no steel tubing on the inside, and it cracks, and now you can't turn the windlass. Um,
Right.
just little things. And the last thing I want to do is get the $10 one and it's a piece of junk, and then try to save Matt's life, and then he dies on me because I was too cheap to spend 20 extra dollars. And so,
Fortunately, I have my own, Steve, so you could use mine if you like.
But that it's a real serious thing, and people do try to, I get it. Everyone's trying to save money. Everyone, every agency, every person. I get it. You don't really need to have 20 of these. You need one, and hopefully you don't need a second one. But as the Navy SEALs always say, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. You can use that mantra. It's funny because I was just out. What was it? Last night? Went out to buy some groceries or something, and how quickly you drop 30, 60, 100, $200 on food, and how much of that food you throw away.
Oh, geez.
Right?
We've talked about this before. It's incredible.
But then you look at this life-saving tool tourniquet, and you're like, oh, $31? Come on. I mean, how much was the recent movie that you went to, Matt?
Oh, geez. Well, even considering that I went on a value day, so I got the ticket for cheap. I bought a soda. It ended up being about $24.
Yeah, right.
Between the ticket and the soda, and I think I bought some pretzel bites.
Yeah, $24 for a 2-hour experience. Or $31. I think these last. I don't quote me on this, but I think they're good for 5 years, aren't they?
I believe so. Yes, I'd have to check. There is some variance, I believe, from tourniquet to tourniquet, but I believe 5 years is the standard on that.
Yeah, trying to see. Well, that even if it's 3 years or 1 year, it's a hell of a lot longer than your 2-hour soiree.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Point being, I think spend the money, get the right one.
And it's really it's in the I keep mine either on my person or in the center console of my car, along with my CPR gear. I mean, it's not difficult. It's easy to have around you and on you, and that way you're always prepared in case the worst happens. I mean, a lot of time if you're not in combat, then usually where you're going to see this is in a motor vehicle accident, right, Steve? Or sometimes you'll have this at work, of course, if you're working with machinery that can really hurt a person. However, I think most of us, we might see this usage in a motor vehicle accident where someone is severely injured in the accident. So always have that handy because you never know when that's going to happen.
Absolutely. All right, so we've broken this down. Different types of tourniquets. You must use a professional. It's wider, it's thicker, and again, even here they're saying, the use of their tourniquet longer than 2 hours may lead to permanent neurological or muscular damage. It's not 100%, but the standard is around 2 hours. And Matt, do you want to elaborate on so if you're in the comments and you're saying 2 hours, that's a very safe answer. And for most situations, that's true. There's some thought that it can go longer. And we're going to share our research on this now.
Okay. So what I've generally found, this is the thinking. There are studies to back this one up. Usually you're looking at about 4 to 6 hours when serious threat from necrosis and from ischemia can develop. So at 4 to 6 hours of the tourniquet being on, you are beginning to approach the zone where you could have enough damage within the limb that limb may need to be amputated. And certainly past 6 hours, it would be a significant risk. However, up until that point, there is, especially after 2 hours, you could see it start to develop, but by and large, they're able to save that limb. But yes, if it's going to be 4 to 6 hours, then you're starting to get into at least the standard recognizes that is a danger zone for the possible need to amputate that limb, that you won't be able to reanimate that limb by what's the word I'm looking for? Returning blood flow to the limb. So at that point, this is where you need to think about where you are and when you're doing it. So most of the time when we're thinking about a tourniquet applying for 2 hours, most of us are not more than 2 hours away from EMS. EMS is very quick. They usually get to you 5 to 10 minutes.
You really shouldn't even use it from 2 hours to EMS. It should be 2 hours to when the surgeon can remove the tourniquet. So from EMS may be able to get to you, but then you got to get to the hospital. So
No, 100%. You're right. Thanks for correcting me, Steve. That is correct. What I'm referring to though is that you are usually within 2 hours. That pre-hospital time is going to be less than 2 hours because most of us are pretty close to a hospital. If we're living in civilization, we're pretty close to a hospital where you can get that to there. But keep in mind, what if you're out in the wild? What if you are in an area that is difficult to reach? Let's say you're a hiker and you take a fall
like
and
27 hours?
yeah, yeah, like
27 hours?
Yeah, 127 hours. I mean that he had to cut off his arm and of course apply a tourniquet ahead of time to survive that ordeal. So yeah, look, there are plenty of times when you are not going to be within 2 hours, but I think the general thinking is that most of the time when this situation arises, the victim is within 2 hours of reaching a hospital and a surgeon.
Yes. So I did a lot of research on this topic going into the medical journals. And when you start to look at the medical journals and the research that was conducted on tourniquets applied and how long they can stay on without a total loss of the limb from the point below the tourniquet. So when we're talking always the point below. So
Yes.
the tourniquet is between, we look at where the heart is and where the tourniquet is applied. So between the heart and to the tourniquet, if you were tracing the blood vessel from the heart to the tourniquet, this is that would be above the tourniquet, and then below the tourniquet is after that. So this is really interesting. So when did the research on the medical journals and started reading all these studies, it turned out that the initial review of these, where this 2 hours or less, or as soon as you apply a tourniquet, you're done, is in the application of those natural rubber or silicone tubings that are usually applied like when you have blood withdrawn from the nurse's station.
Right.
And so because this was so narrow and it was driving into the muscle and really almost cutting through it, this was causing a lot of those loss of limb issues from the tourniquet below. And as we see when we start to look at the professional tourniquets, the CATs, and we look at this ANSI standard, and the whole concept here was that the Army, the military, was trying to find ways to prolong the living tissue of the the extremities below the tourniquet. or that they wouldn't have to amputate these arms, or they'd be able to bring them back the best as possible, or keep as much of it as possible. And that was why the research and development went into this. And one of the things that they found was that the wider the tourniquet, the less likely the ultimate loss of limb from below the tourniquet site. So this is what came about. I think, gosh, was this, what year did they put that in? Now they have some new patents here. Let's see if I can find it real quick.
Probably within the last 20 years, because there was a period there where they actually the armed forces actually moved away completely from the use of the tourniquet back in around the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh well, yeah. The last your is since 2005.
Okay,
Is,
yeah, that sounds about right.
So this is you're approaching almost 20 years, and so our good buddy, he doesn't know it yet. I've actually talked to him once on the phone when we were going to do some training out here. Clint Emerson, I think you said that you had seen some of his discussions
For those who don't know, Clint Emerson is the author of 100 Deadly Skills, or what? I'm not sure if I'm getting the
I'll look
whole
it up real quick again.
Yeah, it's he has actually a couple of them, which are I recommend those books to everyone. They're very, even if you don't think you're ever going to use those skills, they're extremely interesting to read. It's a good read, but they are useful skills.
For all you
Clint
wanna-be
Emerson,
military people.
right. So Clint Emerson is a retired Navy SEAL, and he has years of I'm not sure the extent of it, but let's say probably decades of combat experience. And he has said that in combat situations, they have actually experienced up to 48 hours of wearing a tourniquet and being able to completely return that limb, that extremity to use. Now, I have been unable to find any studies to fully back that up, and I am not going to tell anybody here to count on that tourniquet being able to be applied for 2 days and you're still good to go. But I think in full disclosure, I'll say that that's out there, and maybe those of you who have military experience,
drop
maybe you can already
drop a comment below and let us know. I think understand that, because we could start to wrap this particular episode up. I think you guys get the concept that if you apply a tourniquet, you're trying to stop the bleed and you're trying to save a life. And most of the time, you're going to be within 2 hours range of a hospital where that can be removed. Because as soon as you remove the tourniquet, all the bleeding starts again, right?
Yep.
It's unlikely that blood has clotted enough to keep the extremity from opening up and flowing again.
Right.
So what we're talking about here, and I do want to wrap this up because I know everyone's busy, but the concept is in your training, when you start to think about tourniquets, you're never thinking to yourself, gosh, let me just apply this. We got 7 hours, no big deal, right? Like if you're applying a tourniquet, your thought process has to be, we need to get to the hospital right frickin' now.
Yep.
And no detours, no stopping for fries with the only McDonald's that's open, no milkshakes, right? I mean, it is, if you're, like Matt and I, we do a lot of road tripping. Sometimes we're out in the middle of nowhere. I've been stranded 64 miles east of Reno on a holiday with nothing except water, which in the desert heats up very fast.
Yep.
Point being is, if you're going to apply a tourniquet, your thought process should be, if I apply this tourniquet, I'm taking this person's limb. So the first thing that you have to do is, if you can control the bleed, as Matt said, you have to control the bleed with direct pressure, wrap it up, get it to clot. If that's not possible, or you don't have time to evaluate, and Matt, you're the professional trainer here on this one,
Sure.
then at that point you apply the tourniquet. Is that the correct formulation?
Yes, you're going to assess what you're looking at. Like, okay, are we talking about a excessive flow of blood? Like, let's say it's spurting, or the conventional thinking is if you're seeing more than half a soda can of blood, and if it's coming out that fast, it's going to hit that real quick, then you have a life-threatening bleed. And at that point, you have to assess, okay, let's start direct pressure. That should always be the first option. Hopefully, you have a bleed control kit with you, which has a hemostatic pad that will help coagulation of the blood at the wound portion. Of course, part of the problem, Steve, is sometimes the wound is large enough that,
Well, yeah, but
yeah,
well, I mean, you can get into all the
yeah,
what ifs. But the
yeah,
point is that you should only apply a tourniquet when that is the last option. And
yep,
that, like, as if you can do the direct pressure, if you're not in a place where you can assess, like, let's say it's super dark out, you're in the
hmm,
middle of nowhere, the person's in a position you can't really get to, you can't really put direct pressure on it. These are all factors. These are decisions you have to make on the fly, in the moment, and no one can really judge that at that point in time. So understand that if you apply a tourniquet, the likelihood that the arm is lost is higher than without the tourniquet. And the
right,
longer it goes, the more that possibility rises. And so
yes,
we know from even applying a very narrow banded tourniquet to a professional Cat Gen 7 tourniquet, that 2 hours is very safe, right?
yes,
We also
yes,
know that there have been numerous stories from 4 hours which are safe, right?
mm, yes,
Um, but you should be thinking, I got less than 2 hours to get this
right,
person to wherever they need to be,
yep,
which is a hospital with an emergency room that has surgeons and doctors that can take care of this. Um, at that point, it's all comes down to that surgeon, that care team, and their training and experience, right?
yep,
Um,
yep,
it's out of your hands. So, should you use tourniquets? Absolutely. Should you have them? Absolutely. You know, especially if you're out in public works and you're doing heavy equipment. These things happen quick. They happen all the time.
yes, I do.
Just I I I have a picture here. I'm not going to share it, but we're working on a recent case where someone got drugged across concrete, and it's horrific. Broken
Yes,
neck and broken arm, and he's just lucky that it didn't get torn off, because if it had, he would have bled out right there because nobody had a tourniquet. And
yep,
so, the concept is, especially like I was saying, Matt and I do these road trips. We go out places. Tourniquet's my friend, especially when I'm riding a motorcycle. I
yep,
I it's I may lose an arm, but I'm alive.
yep,
And the likelihood, I'm always going to bet that I'm not going to have that. But, depending on the care team, I may get lucky. you
right,
know, you might get lucky, but you don't want to be betting on luck. We see that with
mhm,
lottery winners, or the lottery and gambling and
right,
sports and all kinds of stuff. Luck ain't getting you anywhere. So you may get lucky, but it's not something you want to bet on. I don't know
yeah,
if you got
depend,
anything else to add there, Matt, but I think tourniquet
yeah.
wise, there's a lot of discussion.
I think we've covered the main points I want to that I would have wanted to touch. Is just the preparation, have the right tourniquet, understand what you're doing when you are applying one, and that's essentially it.
All right. Well, if you got any info, drop it in the comments. We'll talk to you very soon. Don't forget workplace violence prevention coming out very soon. Those requirements are due July 1st. Is that right? Yes.
Yep,
So
July 1st.
yeah,
Yep.
we have a course here on our Dollar Training Club that's available. Hey, and we're getting ready here for our clients and all this. We're going to be heading out for a motorcycle ride just to enjoy Halloween. We're calling it Mummies and Monsters, October 26th. We're going to be going from Redondo to Cachuma Lake. Now's the time to book your campsite if you're interested in going. We're going to head up to the little dockside bar and restaurant called Hooked and, enjoy some company, smoke some cigars and all that good stuff and enjoy nature. Maybe catch a fish.
No promises, Steve.
No promise. All right. Well, that's it. Wanted to throw that out there, and we'll be talking to you very soon.